All right, welcome back, everybody. I was just commenting on the differentiation between the clean and the unclean animals, and how it is that a lot of what we see described as unclean animals for consumption, as far as what the Most High um, warns us about in our eating routine, is to steer away from those animals which consume the carrion and the refuse of the earth, and also in the oceans, the rivers, and the seas. And so I wanted to ask you what your thought on that was, Rob.
Well, yeah, this is one of those things that I don't understand people. I really honestly don't. For me, look, if I call myself a Christian and I say I love God and I trust him, then that to me means I should do what he says. That he's got a reason. He's got a reason for saying the things he says. So when he gives us a fairly comprehensive list of things that are good for us to eat and things that he didn't make for us to eat that are not good for us, that he says, oh, unclean it, you shouldn't eat them. To me, I'm like, all right, God, I get it. I don't understand why. I honestly believe it's a spirit, dude. I really do. I think there's a reason why some of these things, like pork, for instance, is a meat that was sacrificed to idol. Right. So it talks about don't eat meat sacrificed to idols. If you got to go back and look at the context, it's not just, well, I think it would include anything that was sacrificed to idols. But the animal that happened to be sacrificed to the false gods was a pig.
Right.
So, I mean, why? Why? I mean, it's the act of sacrificing a pig on the temple, on the altar during the time of the Maccabees was actually, I believe it's First Maccabees chapter 4, if I remember the address correctly, where it specifically calls the act of sacrificing a pig on the altar the abomination of desolation.
Right. Yes.
Like, that's the abomination of desolation. And when we were looking at that, my wife, Sheila, she says, well, if God considers the offering of a pig on the altar in a stone temple the abomination of desolation, what does he consider it when we put it into our temple, which is supposed to be the temple of the Holy Spirit?
Yes.
I'm like, good point.
Right. Absolutely.
And yet people will go, I'm sorry, just bat crap crazy about, don't tell me I can't eat bacon.
Oh, man, they love their bacon, don't they?
They love their bacon more than God. That's
right.
It's like, if you say you love God, then you should want to do what he says. I mean, that's 1 John chapter 2. Right? I mean, it tells you that. 1 John chapter 5, he says, this is the love of God. If you want to say you love God, people say there's only 2 commandments: love God, love your neighbor. Well, okay, let's look at the first one. Love God. What does it mean to love God? It's not just a generic term. Love is an action word. Mm-hmm. And when you read the Bible, let the Bible interpret itself, it says, 1 John chapter 5 says, this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, as commandments are not burdensome.
Amen.
And so then if I say I love God, then I should want to do what he said. Furthermore, this is the thing when it comes to this issue of meat, is even modern secular science that could care less about the Torah, God, or any of it, modern secular science tells you this stuff's not good for you.
Right.
Just coincidentally, the same animals that God says are unclean and not fit for us to eat, science has confirmed this is not good for you, And we even did some of the, you've heard maybe, test that, like, even pork, you can cook it all you want and stuff still survives in it.
Right. The worms.
Yeah, we did that once. We'd heard, let's try it. So we, a friend of ours, we cooked up a ham real good. I mean, to the point where you would normally eat it. And then you pour, and this should tell you something about Coke and Pepsi too, but you pour Coke on it and the stuff starts coming out. You're like,
yeah,
man.
Yeah, that's creepy.
It is creepy. I mean, it's like a horror show creepy. And then when you think about, that stuff gets into your blood and into your organs, into your brain even, and there's also been, I don't quite know what to make of this, but I've seen, maybe I could call them studies done where, they say you are what you eat. And
right.
People who have a long habit of eating pork products start to end up with pork-like features. Whether they're just, we even say it, porking out, right? When you start gaining weight,
right?
Facial features starting to get, changed a little bit, you know, look, all I know is he said don't eat it, and he has a reason for saying that. He's not just trying to be a mean guy, mean God up there telling you, I'm going to ruin everything for you. He's like, look, I know how I created that animal, and I know how I created you, and you're not compatible. You can eat it if you want to. And, Dean Odell is like, oh, my family's eating pork forever. My aunt, he gives this big testimony about his relatives, how they're like so godly and everything. And they've been eating pork all their life, whatever. Right. Thank God for his grace. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
That's God's grace right there. But, and some of it, we did in ignorance. Before I looked into this stuff for myself, I loved bacon.
Yes. We all did. Right.
I loved it. I did. After I read it and looked into the science of it, so I looked into the scripture of it, the commandments of it, and then the science of it, and all of it's in agreement that you should be eating this stuff. Mm-hmm. Okay. Once you know, then you're accountable. If you don't know, I think there is a special grace when you don't know. How can you be accountable for what you don't know? Right.
Right.
And this society, is putting pork in everything. Like
everything.
I went to a conference a couple of years ago, and we went out to a restaurant. I think it was Denny's, and they had bacon ice cream. It was like bacon ice cream sundae. What?
Right.
It's in everything. It's like, well, that's just the devil, right? And everything God says to do or not to do, the devil's going to flip it.
Yes. Try to normalize it.
Yeah, whatever God says do, he says don't do. Whatever God says don't do, he's like, yeah, go for it. It's all good. And I'm sorry, but praying for God to bless something that he said is not something he's going to bless, I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. But people, they love their pork, and so a lot of people will fight against you tooth and nail on that particular item. But I do want to share one quick passage before we move on. This is from the Legends of the Jews, and it says here that God accorded permission to Noah and his descendants to use the flesh of animals for food, which had been forbidden from the time of Adam until then. Yeah. And so,
that's
yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is a quote from the Legends of the Jews, and so it confirms, what we've been talking about with regard to the early patriarchs as being vegetarians, and so I do think there's absolutely something to that. We're not supposed to consume, even with, as you said, with our teeth and with the shortness of our intestines. That those kind of things show that we are not supposed to be meat eaters, especially in the manner that we are in this culture, because people, consume meat as the focus of their meal, every meal. And a lot of people ignore, eating any kind of raw fruit, vegetable, or even cooked fruits and vegetables. And a lot of people don't even drink water, which I don't know how they survive, but
again, that's God's grace and testament to this amazing thing that he created in his image. Like, I know people that live on soda and Red Bull and coffee, like, and their body has to be just trying to siphon what little tiny bit of water it can get out of that stuff.
Right.
For me, like that's primarily what I drink, water.
Yeah, me too.
And my wife got me onto coconut water. At first, I couldn't stand.
Oh yeah, I love those.
Now I like
aloe water.
Yeah, I was doing aloe a little bit there. Somebody was telling me it's not so good for you, but
oh really?
Somebody's always got to study on something.
Yeah.
So I say, look, do your own research on that. But the coconut water, because it's got potassium and stuff in there, and I've noticed that for me, some of the various physical ailments and stuff that I struggle with go away when I have a proper intake of specifically potassium and magnesium and calcium, like neurological shaking stuff. And so, coconut water's got some of that, and it's it's assimilated like water.
Right.
Just, so yeah, I don't know how to live these days, honestly.
Yeah, I don't either, because some of the girls that work for me, they never drink water, and I don't know how they function, but yeah. But let's move on into the distinction between the Genesis 1:26 through 28, the narrative, the creation, because I do believe in, a lot of people believe these two accounts are the same, just repeated. But I believe that in the first account that we see these particular beings, these hominids, that they are created on the earth. And in my opinion, Adam was not initially placed on the earth, but in paradise, and that he fell from where the tree of life is now and where the home of the righteous is, which I believe is above the vaulted dome of the earth, and that losing his bright nature and being transformed into mortality and being placed under the authority of death, that Adam was then banished from paradise and placed here on the earth, where not only the pre-Adamites were, but also the fallen ones, Legion, Lucifer, and the 1/3 that had already been cast down here on what Enoch says is the second day. But again, looking at the Genesis 1:26, I believe that it reveals that God created these hominids as couples, male and female, and that they were multiple races. And examining the creation story, even in the Targum, it makes mention of the different colors of people in being associated with this creation. And so, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll say this whole line of thinking is new for me. So, I mean, really new for me. It's not something that I've spent a whole lot of time looking into, because I was always under the assumption that Genesis 2 is just an elaboration on Genesis 1.
Right.
But, listening to, your stuff and looking into other ancient texts and things of that nature, and then just looking at it again for myself, which is why when I read it earlier, I stressed some words as I was reading it. It does appear to me now. I mean, it's sort of like, you ever see those like mind trick pictures? Is it the old lady or the young lady? And you look at it, it looks like an old lady, and all of a sudden, whoa, it looks like a young lady. Or either it's a vase or two faces pointing at each other. It's like your mind just kind of switches on you. You're like, oh, I can see something I didn't see before.
Right.
That's kind of like what this is for me. Is I'm looking at it now. I'm like, the picture just flipped on me, and I'm seeing it a little bit differently now. And you're right. I mean, there is a fair amount of ancient text and commentary and things of that nature that would lead you to believe, well, there might have been something else going on there. In terms of where paradise is, your work that's all new to me. Also, the idea was up there. My Yahuwah Triangles series that I did back in 2014, just about 4 or 5 months before being introduced to Mark Sargent, who ruined my life, April 15th, from that point forward. I'd done quite a bit of research, biblically speaking, and come to the conclusion that the garden is the land that we now call Israel, and that the location of the true trees were specifically Gerizim and Ebal in Shechem. And I build a whole case for why I believe that is the case, and that the tree of life was in the location we now see Mount Gerizim, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was at the location we now know as Mount Ebal. And there are lots of different stories in the Bible that keep going back to Shechem over and over and over again. So
yeah,
I came to believe that that's ground zero in the Garden of Eden. Look, I mean, our research takes us into different directions. That's the direction that it took me. And looking even at some of the stuff we'll get to in Genesis chapter 4,
right.
that's some new stuff for me to think about too, but I'm going to put it back up on the screen again, just so everybody can have a look at it again themselves. It says, and God created man in his own image, verse 27, in the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And this is all a narrative that's going to be concluded in verse 20 and 31, saying, and this was the 6th day. So this all happened on the 6th day. I don't see that God created all these things and had all the animals come to Adam and named all the Adams, and then Adam named all the animals, and then he put them to sleep and pulled Eve out all on day 6.
Right.
It no longer appears that way to me.
Right.
And then, of course, you look at some of the other, ancient Jewish commentary and Hebrew texts and stuff, it doesn't seem to fit either. So, I mean, you have right here, created he them. So there's still, even if we're talking about a pre-Adamic race, they are still in the image and likeness of God.
Yes.
Here, which would then say that Adam is something maybe different, more special.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but like I went with the premise, and Doug Ham talks about this also, that we were originally created as light beings, and
Yes.
that when we partook of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they actually ate fruit. And I know you believe that they ate fruit also.
Yes.
People who get all wigged out about serpent seed jump the gun, just like I did. I always look. He offered it to, or Eve offered it to Adam also. So the assumption in serpent seed is that partaking of the tree was partaking in sex.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, she gave to Adam too. So did Adam have homosexual relations with the serpent? No. So I used to just block the whole thing out because that was my argument.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I actually took time to hear the other side of the argument, which so many of us don't do, and I was just as guilty of it, you see, well, no, they still ate fruit, physical thing off a tree. They still ate, but what happened when they ate it is the question. And it's Doug's position, and I've come to believe the same thing, that when they ate of that fruit, they lost their light suit. And that's why, look, if you're walking around naked, you're not going to all of a sudden eat a fruit and go, hey, why am I naked? Something must have changed.
Yes.
And if they lost their light suit being, they were stripped of it, they then saw their flesh. And some say that may have been even when, blood as we know it now, whatever the case may be, that being part of flesh manifested, whatever the case may be, they lost their light suit and they looked and they're like, whoa, I'm naked.
Yes.
That's a lot more sense to me. But then that would beg the question in my mind, just now thinking out loud here, looking at verse 27, if we presume that there are a pre-Adamite civilization and that male and female were created in the image of God here, then would they not also have light suits? And if they did, why would Adam and Eve partaking of the fruit cause them to lose their light suits?
Right. With regard to that, I believe they were particularly made on the earth, and they were told, because this is something that Adam and Eve were not told initially, where it says to be fruitful, to multiply, and replenish the earth. And we were talking about, in the first day, how I believe that the war in heaven led to the destruction of the earth, and that what we see is in Genesis 1:3 onwards, a recreation, a reestablishment, and a repopulation of the earth with creatures that God had to, that this was the second world age, and that he had to re-inhabit it and reform it to be occupied again because of that destruction. And we see here that, these particular beings, they are made on the earth. So I think that there's a distinction between Adam and Eve, and that they were earthly and corporeal, whereas Adam and Eve were made spiritual and placed into the garden of God. And so that's my distinction, but we'll, get into the whole thing, because I do agree with Doug as far as that they were clothed in light. It speaks about them as being clothed in vestures of light and having a bright nature. And that I know we're jumping the gun a little bit here, but in Genesis chapter 2, verse 25, it speaks of them as being naked and unashamed. And then all of a sudden, when they eat this fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, well, they are then placed under the authority of death. I believe that's when their genitals appeared, and that Satan seduced Eve, and then Adam eating of the fruit, that he repeated the act with Eve, and that resulted in the birth of Abel. And that the children, the seed of the serpent was Cain, the seed of the woman was Abel, and because Cain killed his half-brother, that then Seth, which his name means replacement, substitution, and compensation, that he was born to be the progenitor of Adam's line. And so when they eat from this fruit, they lose their bright nature, they are made mortal, their genitals appeared, and after the act of the seduction and Adam repeating the act with Eve, they then covered their genitals with fig leaves and then tried to hide from God. And then, the punishments have to do with bearing children, and there being enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. We'll go into that, of course, when we get to that part. But again, looking here at Genesis 1:26 and through 28, these particular hominids, it says that, let us make man in our image, let them have dominion over the fish of the sea. So this is specifically over the creatures that have been made in the previous day to occupy the earth and to inhabit the earth. And then it says, so God created man in his own image. In the image God created he him, male and female created he them. God blessed them. God said unto them, be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth. And see, a lot of people that, they contend with me that Adam and Eve were told to multiply, replenish, and be fruitful. That's not true. That actually is connected to the preadamites, which were made on the earth, and they were made to repopulate what had been a destroyed earth. And they were the ones that were told to go forth and multiply. And I do believe that these are not only couples, but multiple races, and that they were spread all over the earth. And then we see after, the generations of, and after the sixth day going into Genesis 2, then we see the story of Adam. And there's also a flashback where there's, talks about how there was no rain. And then we have, the seventh day. And then there's a flashback of, and every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. I think this is looking back at that age previous to even the preadamites, and there was not yet rain. It says, but there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. The Lord God formed man. Because in the other biblical narratives, it talks about how paradise was created before the foundations of the earth. And so, then that's where I think Adam was placed after God had gone through the 6 days of creation, that Adam was made, even though his body, yes, was pulled from the dust of the earth. It speaks about in many different accounts, and we put together a book called the Primary Adamic Literature, which shares all of the different stories of the life of Adam and Eve from all over the world. And there are multiple cultures and multiple different translations of the life of Adam and Eve from all over the world, that when you read them in fullness together, you see without a doubt that when they were cast out and after they lost their bright nature, they did not even understand how to walk. They had never experienced dark as far as, night. They had never experienced hunger or drank water. They had never experienced heat and cold. All of these different things come forth in reading this primary Adamic literature, which we can share some of that when we return from break. But let me give you a chance to comment before we go there.
I'm still trying to wrap my mind around all that.
Yeah, it's a lot. It really is.
I haven't read the text that you're referring to. So although I did read the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Adam and Eve, that talks about all the things they went through after they were expelled from the garden. And what a tragic story. You know,
Yes. The
I mean,
loss of paradise.
the loss of paradise, and how many times they tried to kill themselves. You know,
3. Mm-hmm.
I mean, they went through some serious trauma as a result of that whole thing.
Yes.
I'm still kind of stuck looking at verse 27. You know, them being created in His image. You know, these pre-adamites.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll be right back for second hour.